Yes, just enjoying some childhood memories, filling out a Panini sticker album. Speaking of 2014 host Brazil, Group C and D preview today. Of course, Group C starts off with Brazil, as just mentioned, being led into this tournament by managerial maestro Carlo Ancelotti, who is taking his talents to the international game, to the world's biggest stage for the first time ever. How will that play out for Brazil? Next up, you have the Cinderellas of the 2022 World Cup, and that is Morocco. How is this team going to play out after just reaching such heights people never thought were possible for a team like them? How can they temper those expectations coming into this tournament? Then you have Haiti, a team that's just happy to be here because it is their first World Cup since 1974. What kind of experience are they bringing in? To close out Group C, you have, of course, Scotland, who are in their 9th tournament, still have yet to make it out of the group stage. Is this finally the year the Flower of Scotland makes it on to the knockout stage in Group D? It is our last host, is the United States of America. A lot of pressure on this team this year. How are they going to cope with that under manager Mauricio Pochettino? Next up after that is Paraguay, making their first tournament appearance since 2010. Went to the quarterfinals, haven't been back since. Team that got on fire late in Common Bowl qualifying. How is that going to translate? Then you have Australia coming out of Asia. Team that kind of is just consistent at the World Cup of being good but not great. Can they take that next step forward here in the United States, Canada, and Mexico? Close out, it's everybody's always tournament dark horse, and it is Türkiye. How is that going to play out for them this year? Of course, a lot of people are going to have them as a dark horse. Are they really, though? We're about to find out. So let's get after it. Welcome back into the Nick Bird Sports Network. It is day 2 of group stage preview for the World Cup. Today is, as just mentioned, Group C and D. A lot to get figured out here. A lot of things to go through. So we are just going to go straight to the monitor here and get straight into it. Because, folks, we start off very interestingly with Group C. A group that I think has a lot of question marks in it. It doesn't give you a lot of answers, but there are a lot of questions I'm very interested to figure out. So let's go to the monitor and let's start figuring out and trying to answer some of those questions. All right, here we go. Group C. As mentioned before, it is Brazil. Of course, 5-time champions, most titles of all time. Can they get their 6th this tournament? Going to be a big thing to figure out here. Morocco, your Cinderella story of 2022. Can they maybe one-up that this tournament? Haiti, who kind of just seem happy to be here. And, of course, Scotland. Let's get straight into it with Brazil. Of course, Brazil, as just mentioned, 5-time World Cup champions. Come into this tournament, I think, with a lot more questions than they have in previous World Cups. And I'm not sure how to interpret that. Obviously, this team is being managed by Carlo Ancelotti. That was a big coup for Brazil to get him to come down there to manage this team. I really don't know how his game is going to translate onto the international stage, though. And I think that is one of the reasons why this team has so many questions coming into this World Cup. I will give them the benefit of the doubt that the group obviously is not the greatest of greats. It's not like there are many challenges. I think maybe one game really stands out, and we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the bigger stories here is that Neymar is on this team. Just a player been plagued by injuries for what feels like all year. He is back. One final tournament run for him because it can't seem to stay healthy. He's not even healthy coming into this tournament. I know he picked up an injury, I think, a week or two ago, and there were even doubts if he was going to make the squad, but he is in the squad. He is going to be wearing the number 10 for Brazil. Everybody knows what that means. It is going to be quite interesting to see how that plays out because I don't know if he's going to have a massive role for this team. You look at their schedule, they open up June 13th against Morocco in New Jersey in the Meadowlands. That is the biggest game of this group, I think, and I don't particularly think it's close. They will then travel to Philadelphia, take on Haiti on June 19th. They close out in what will just be an absolutely muggy game in Miami against Scotland. How that's going to play out will be very interesting because obviously Brazil much more used to the heat and humidity, maybe not as much of what Miami gets, but Scotland, obviously, that is not a country known for their humidity. So let's take a look at this squad that Carlo Ancelotti called up. In goal, you have Alisson, Liverpool goalkeeper for how much longer? That's a question for another day. You have Ederson, of course, the former Man City keeper, moved to Türkiye this year to play for Fenerbahce, and Weverton, who plays for Grêmio in Brazil. Those are going to be your three keepers. You look at your defenders. You have Marquinhos, of course, just coming off a Champions League victory for PSG. Danilo, Luiz, Alexandro, Gabriel, Bremer, Wesley, Robert Ibanez, Douglas Santos, and Leo Pereira. Close out the defenders. Your midfield is going to be Casemiro, Lucas Paqueta, Bruno Guimaraes, Fabinho, and Danilo Santos. You look at your forwards, the aforementioned Neymar, Vinicius Jr., Rafinha, Gabriel Martinelli, Mateus Cunha, Endrick, which I know is a player a lot of people are excited to see at this World Cup. I'm excited to see him at this World Cup. The question is, how much playing time does he see at the World Cup? Luis Enrique, Igor Tigalo, and Ryan. So that is the 26-man squad for Brazil. Here's what we have as a projected starting 11 for this squad. I have them in a 4-4-2. It kind of seems like that's where we're going to be running right now, at least from what we can tell early on. A lot of that can change, obviously. But Alisson going to be starting in that. I don't think there's going to be any true shock there. I think he is Brazil's number one, and he will be Brazil's number one unless there are injuries. You look at that back four. I think you have Wesley there on the left, Marquinhos and Gabriel in the central defender roles, and Douglas Santos on the right. You have in your midfield for Rafinha, Casemiro, Bruno Guimaraes, and Gabriel Martinelli, and your two strikers, or two up top players, I should say, will be Vinicius Jr. and Mateus Cunha. Now, this is where, like I said, I think there are a few questions that come into play here. One of those is being, what are you doing with Neymar? Is he going to have a fuller role in this World Cup? I think that's a major question. How is Carlo Ancelotti going to play him? I don't think he's going to get much playing time because I don't think he's healthy. I think it's as simple as that. I do not believe he is healthy. I think he's kind of there in a support role. I'm not expecting much from him. I think the other question is Endrick. A lot of people are expecting a lot of things from him, and he may be very good. I don't think he's starting for Brazil, especially in that first game against Morocco. Do we see him start against somebody like Haiti? Potentially. I'm not fully convinced by it, though, to put him in the starting 11 for, the games against Morocco and Scotland, which I think are two much more different games than it is against Haiti. I think he will get a start somewhere. I don't think it will be at the beginning. I guess there could be a question about goaltending, just because Alisson has been on and off injured this year. He hasn't played the greatest this year for Liverpool. I just don't think anybody else here has really made a case to jump out and take advantage here. This, though, this is a Brazil squad. Of course, they're going to have hype around them. It does feel a bit diminished from what we've seen in years past. The talent doesn't seem to be there like they used to be. And this could be the most beatable Brazil team of our lifetimes. It's going to be interesting to see how they play out because, of course, you can never count out the Brazilians. 5 titles. You don't get that just by pure luck. So there we go. That's what we have for Brazil. So let's move in here. Morocco, as mentioned, Cinderella story of the 2022 World Cup, making it all the way to that third place game where they ended up losing, of course, to Croatia. It's an interesting team coming in. We'll say that. They lost the AFCON final. Of course, they were technically awarded it in court months after. Does that really matter? Who knows? This is still a very good team. I have to give them that. They're in a group where, like mentioned, the Brazil game is the biggest game of this group. Everything past that is kind of just there. If this Morocco team is that good and, they get a win against Brazil somehow, they win this group quite easily, I think. I think they kind of roll over Scotland and Haiti. And I don't know if this team is that good, though. I know I just said that this might be the most beatable Brazil team in a while. I'm not 100% convinced, though, in this Morocco team either, which really puts this group kind of up in the air because I don't think either other team in this group is really going to compete at the top, which means both these two teams are going to have to play their absolute hearts out in the first game of their tournaments. Let's take a look at the squad that is being brought to the United States for this tournament. Yasan Bonu, Munir Modemi, and Ahmed Reda Tangouri are your 3 goalkeepers. Your defenders are going to be, of course, Hakimi, Nassef Agard, Nosar Mazuri, Youssef Barami, Anas Salahdin, Chad Raidi Issa Diop, Zakaria Eloundi, and Ranunde Halhal. Those are your defenders. Your midfielders, Sofan Amrabat, Ezian Odunze, Bilal El Kahuns, Ismail Sabri, Neil El Andoui, Samir El Morabet, Ayu El Bodi, and your forwards are Ilob El Kabi, Abdeb Elazuli, Sofan Radimi, Brahim Diaz, Chenzarin Tabibi, Jessamine Yazin, and Aduble Abrumori. That is going to be the squad that is going to be brought into this World Cup. A lot of names, of course, recognizable from last time around. This is how I have them lining up. 4-2-3-1. Bonu, he's getting the start in that. He started in 2022. He's getting the start in that again. I 100% believe that, just because he kind of has been a massive part of this team for quite a while. I mean, he has 89 caps, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which is second right behind, I believe, Hakimi in the group. It's massive to have that type of presence of a player that has multiple caps. Here, I have Nozar Mazuri on the left wing. In the middle 2 positions of your central defender roles, I have Issa Diop on the right and Nassef Agord on the left. And then your captain, of course, Hakimi, is on that right wing defender side. Your 2 defensive midfielders I have as Samir El Morabet and I believe it was Neil El Aoundi. You take a look at your three central midfielders of Ezazuli, Olani, and Brahim Diaz, and your one attacker or main striker is Ayoub El Kabibi, who has the most goals in play for this Moroccan team at 37. He's sitting on 71 caps, of course. Another player memorable from that run just 4 years ago. So I think one of the major questions here for Morocco is you just had a generational run in 2022. How do you match that again? I don't know if you can. I do think some factors played in here on 2022. Obviously, playing in Qatar, it's somewhat similar climates to what you have to deal with in Morocco. And I get a lot of these players are European. It's not like they're playing every single game in Morocco. But you kind of are used to it. And maybe that played a role into Morocco making it that far in 2022. I do see, obviously, a lot of names from 2022. And there are a lot of new mixes in here. How is that going to play out? You never want to just bring your whole squad back 4 years later because A, they're 4 years older, and B, usually doing that never works. That has been the problem with a lot of former champions in the next tournament when they get knocked out in the group stage. Of course, France broke that last year and they went all the way to the final. But how does this team mesh that and have the people that were on this team 4 years ago being like, we did this 4 years ago, we're doing it our way. And then new players kind of just sitting there like, what are we doing basically? How that's going to mesh is very interesting because I always think about that, looking back to the World Cup prior and how many players you bring back from that World Cup, especially if you had success. Morocco has had the most success they've ever had in a World Cup, ever in that last tournament. I think they mixed well here. The worrying part is that African Cup of Nations performance this year wasn't the greatest. I wasn't truly convinced by it. I know I'm the last person you need to convince with this, but I think there's still a lot to be desired for Morocco here. We'll move on. As mentioned, Haiti in their first tournament since the year 1974. Their second ever appearance at this tournament, obviously. This is going to be quite the scene with Haiti in this World Cup. The schedule, I don't think, plays out well for them. I think truly their easiest game, and I use air quotes for that because I don't think it's easy. They are the team that everybody's looking at in this group and being like, that's an easy 3 points. Their easiest game is their first game against Scotland because past that, it is not easier. That middle game against Brazil could get ugly very fast, and depending on where Morocco is in this tournament, that game could also go south quite fast. They make it in through qualifying through CONCACAF, of course, with the U.S., Canada, and Mexico all qualifying. It has opened the doors for teams like Haiti to qualify this year. I think this is going to be good experience for them. The question is, do they, get back to this stage at some point in the near future? I don't know if they do, truly, because this may be as good as it gets. And let's take a look at the squad that is coming to America for Haiti. In net, your goalkeepers are going to be Gianni Placide, Alexander Pierre, and Jose Duvinger. Your defenders are Rico Ade, Cardin Cruz, Martin Experience, Jean-Kevon Duverne, Duke Lacroix, Wilgens Paigon, Hannes Delcroix, and Quito Termoni. Your midfielders are going to be Leverton Pierre, Danley Jean Jacques, Carl Satine, Jean Rickner Belgrade, Woodenski Pierre, Dominique Simon, and your forwards are going to be Dawkins Nazon, Franzi Perrault, Derek Etienne Jr., Lucius Deedson, Ruben Provence, Jose Casimir, Yasin Fortune, Wilson Isidore, who is a massive coup for Haiti to get internationally, by the way, and Lenny Joseph. Now, as just mentioned, you look at the list, there's now there's technically only one player in the top 5 league. Of course, Wolves getting relegated takes Jean Rickner Belgrade off that list, and Wilson Isidore is on that, the only player on that list. I believe recent commitment, obviously, to this Haiti team. You're going to get commitments like that when you qualify for a World Cup and the other nations you could potentially represent don't really have space for you. So you look at somebody like Wilson Isidore, who only has 3 caps for Haiti, but he is by far the best player on this team. So let's take a look at what we have for their starting 11. As mentioned, the captain, Johnny Pladin, I have starting in net. I don't see anybody taking that from him. 80 caps. I believe that is the most for Haiti at this World Cup. So he's clearly going to take that. I look at your defenders in this 4-4-2. Ricardo Ade. Carlins Cruz. And then, of course, you have Hans Delcroix. And then Duke Lacroix as your 2 defenders there. You get to your midfield. You have Deedson, Belgrade, Danley Jean Jacques, and, of course, Mr. Provence himself. And then you look at your 2 front-playing strikers here, and that is Wilson Isidore, as just mentioned, and I believe it is Dawkins Nazon. This is what we're going to see from manager Sebastian Mingue. Overall, obviously the easiest thing to say here is Haiti's just lucky to be here. Let's be 100% honest. Haiti's happy to be here. They're going to enjoy their 3 games. Now we're going to wish them goodbye. I really wish I could hype up this Haiti team because it's a great story, obviously. Their first World Cup since 1974. A nation that's been in turmoil for a long, long time. I truly wish I could hype them up a lot more. I don't see this team doing anything. I think they got put in one of the worst groups possible for them. I'm not expecting much. So as much as it pains me to say, this team is kind of dead in the water, and I don't see them making it out of the group stage. Let's move on here. Our last team in Group C. And that is, of course, the flower of Scotland. Coming out of UEFA, their 9th World Cup appearance, and as mentioned before, they still have yet to make it out of the group stage. I mean, if you want to go back even farther or add even more on to this, they've made 4 appearances in the Euro. So they've made a total of 12 appearances in major tournaments in their history. And remember, they were the first team to play an international game against England. So they have 12 tournament appearances between the World Cup and the Euro, have not made it out of the group once. They have been grouped 1954, 1958, 1974, 1978, 1982, 1986, 1990, 1992, 1996, 1998, 2020, and 2024. I think this might be the year. I think this might be the year Scotland finally makes it out. Obviously, the big question is going to be, can they actually do it? This group is not the easiest, but with 8 of the 12 third-place teams advancing, I think the door is open for them. I expect them to get a win against Haiti. It's the other two games I'm not sure. If you can eke out a draw somewhere against Morocco or against Brazil, I think you're golden. You will be on to the round of 32. You will get that monkey off your back. You will be playing knockout soccer, football, foosball, whatever you want to call it. You will be playing the knockout version of it. My biggest worry for Scotland is, will the pressure get to them? I think it's a good thing for them that 2 of the 3 games will be in Boston. That Miami game, they legit might melt. I will be completely honest. They may melt in that game. And that worries me, which means you have to get at least a point against Morocco. Can they do that? I think they potentially brought the team to do that. The question is, can they actually do it? Let's take a look at the squad that was called up for this World Cup for Scotland. A lot of familiar faces on here for anybody that has followed Scotland football. Managed by Steve Clarke, of course, who's been in the position since 2019. He has led them to the Euro in 2020, which was played in 21, and Euro 2024. He finally gets them back to the World Cup. This is the squad he's bringing. Angus Gunn, Liam Kelly, and Craig Gordon are your goalkeepers. Aaron Hickey, Andy Robertson, Grant Hanley, Kieran Tierney, Jack Hendry, Jean Sutar, Dominic Hyam, Nathan Patterson, Anthony Rodson, Scott McKenna are your defenders. Your midfielders are Scotty McTominay, Jean McGinn, Tyler Fletcher, Ryan Christie, Lewis Ferguson, Kenny McLean. Your forwards here are London Dykes, Che Adams, Ross Stewart, Ben Gannon-Dock, George Hurst, Lawrence Shankland, and Findlay Curtis. Now, as I mentioned, I think this is a very good group of 26 for Scotland. Playing in the 4-4-2. This is how we have it lined up. Angus Gunn in net. Andy Robertson, captain on that left wing defensive role. You have McKenna, you have Sutar, and you have Hickey as your final players there on that back line. I think this is actually a very good back line. Would I have potentially fit in Kieran Tierney somewhere? I would have liked to be honest, but I don't see a spot for him right now. You look at your midfielders. Of course, on the right side are going to be Scotty McTominay and John McGinn. Of course, John McGinn just led Aston Villa to their first European trophy in like 40 years in the Europa League. Scotty McTominay has had a fantastic season at Napoli. The other 2 defenders there are Ryan Christie, who had a phenomenal season at Bournemouth. I do have to give him that. That was quite the performance. I was impressed. And then your final player is, of course, Curtis over there on the right. Let's take a look at your 2 attacking options at the top, and that is Lawrence Shankland. He had a great season for Hearts. Hearts lose the title on the final day. And Che Adams, who did decent for Torino this year. Wasn't like anything phenomenal to call home about, but 6 goals, 3 assists in Serie A. It's pretty decent. I will give him that. Overall, though, I think this is, as mentioned, I think this is a good, not great Scotland team. I think this is one of the better ones they've had. I do have to give them that. The biggest question here is obviously there is a disparity in talent between that right midfield and the left midfield. You have two just phenomenal players in Europe, in Scotty McTominay and John McGinn. And then you do have the other side, which, I mean, no offense to them. They aren't Scott McTominay and John McGinn. The goal scoring is obviously a question here too. Like I said, Che Adams didn't have the greatest of seasons. Lawrence Shankland did a bit better. I believe it was 16 goals in this in this season. It wasn't as good as what he's done before. I know he had like 24 goals a few years ago, but he was a major part in Hearts being in it until the final day when obviously they lost to Celtic. I'm going to be very interested to see how this team plays out at the World Cup because they do have that monkey on their back. Are they going to finally make it? Are they going to finally get to the knockout stages for the first time? Can they, figure out a path? Because there is a path for them. I have to give them that. I'm very interested to see how this Scotland team plays out at the World Cup. So that brings an end to Group C. Of course, not going to go full predictions yet. I think I have two safe predictions, though. Haiti finished 4th. I think Scotland finished 3rd. As mentioned, it feels like that Brazil-Morocco game that opens up this group is the biggest game of this group. Now, that game could easily end in a 1-1 draw or 0-0 draw, who knows? And then we have to ship that title to somewhere else. But those two teams, I think, are, I will say by far and away, the two best teams in this group. If somebody can come away with a win in that game, they will win this group, just given the drop in talent between those two and the other two. I think that is a pretty safe bet. I will say, though, I think Scotland get enough to get into the knockout stages, and if they don't, that is a major problem. And I know tiebreakers aren't going to be the greatest here. And that is going to be a major question of how that all plays out, because it is such a convoluted system about how third place teams are getting placed in the bracket. It's a mess. That is another story for another day, though. Let's get on Group D. You have your final host here in the United States. Of course, they are basically the main host of this tournament. You have Paraguay, who returned to the World Cup for the first time since 2010. They made a run to the quarterfinals that year. I believe they played Spain in the quarterfinals. It gave them kind of all they could handle, and it wasn't enough in the end. You have Australia, a team that is just kind of constantly at World Cups now. Ever since they made that switch from being the Oceania Footballing Confederation over to the Asian Football Confederation again in 2006, this is a team that is just kind of a constant at World Cups. And then you have, of course, Türkiye, a team that always seems to be everybody's dark horse. I remember Euro 2020. Oh, Türkiye is the dark horse. Türkiye is going to be the team that surprises everybody. And then Türkiye loses like 3-0, I think, to Italy in the opening game. For Türkiye, this is obvious their first appearance in the World Cup since they took 3rd place in 2002, which is just kind of hard to believe, to be honest. But here we are anyways. Only their 3rd World Cup appearance, too. Their first one came in 1954. Their second one was 2002. Their third one is this one. That's something we will get, obviously, much more into down the line. But it is time to start here with, of course, the hosts. Well, co-hosts. The United States of America. This is a massive, massive, massive World Cup for the U.S. If they do not succeed here, major questions have to be asked at U.S. Soccer Federation. You have a brilliant path. This is, I think, the easiest group the U.S. has had since they have constantly made World Cups again, so since 1990. This is the easiest group they have. The fact, though, is the U.S. isn't at that level where they can just simply just blow out all these teams. That could be a major problem here, because this group, I think, is the most even between all four teams in that all the teams are good, not great, and all four have major, major flaws. We'll get into the U.S.'s major flaw here in a minute. But you look at the schedule, you open up June 12th against Paraguay. You then travel to Seattle to face off against Australia on June 19th, and you close out against Türkiye on the 25th back in LA. Obviously, I know a lot of U.S. fans are kind of mad that the U.S. is basically staying on the West Coast this whole tournament. And you know what? It is what it is. I don't think it's that big of an issue. I know in 94 they played two games at the Rose Bowl, and then their round of 16 game against Brazil was in, Stanford. Obviously, their first game was at the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan, so cross-country there. But I don't have a problem with the U.S. playing all their games on the road, or on the West Coast, I should say. It is what it is. I know it's a little bit later for us here on the East Coast, but you got to deal with it sometimes. This is sports, and you live and you learn. So let's take a look at the squad that Mauricio Pochettino has brought to the World Cup. A squad that has already been, torn apart, ripped up and down, left and right. Let's take a look. Goalkeepers: Matt Turner, Matt Freese, Chris Brady. This is the weakness for the U.S. 100%. Their biggest weakness is goalkeeping. They've not had a successful goalkeeper basically since Tim Howard. You look back at U.S. soccer in the early 2000s. That was the only thing the U.S. could produce was goalies. You had, Casey Kelleher, the aforementioned Tim Howard. You had Brad Friedel, Brad Guzan for a second. It always felt like the U.S. was putting out goalkeepers. Well, that kind of dried up, and now they're producing good, not great European players, yet they cannot produce a goalkeeper to save their lives. And I'm not going to fully knock MLS here because MLS does have a good representation on this roster. And yes, there are some questions around it. But the U.S.'s top three goalkeepers should not all three be goalkeepers from MLS. Like, at some point, it feels like we have to develop a European talent to go over there like Tim Howard, who played, 12, 13 years at Everton. You have to have somebody like Brad Friedel. He played all over England for, I think, at least a decade. You got to have players like that get experience on those top levels. Yes, MLS is getting better, but it's still not fully there yet. And that is my biggest worry for the United States here. You look at your defenders, Serginho Dest, Chris Richards, Anthony Robinson, Austin Trusty, Miles Robinson, Captain Tim Ream, Alex Freeman, Max Arfston, Mark McKenzie, and Joe Scally. You look at your midfielders, which I think this is another weak position. You have Tyler Adams, Giovanni Reyna, Weston McKennie, Sebastian Berhalter, Christian Roldan, and Malik Tillman. Your forwards for the U.S. here are Ricardo Pepi, Christian Pulisic, Brendan Aronson, Haji Wright, Florin Balogun, Timothy Weah, and Alejandro Zendejas closes it out for Mauricio Pochettino's squad of 26. Let's take a look at how I believe they will line up in that first game. I'm going with a 3-4-2-1 here. Matt Freese is getting the start in net. Freese seems to be the player that Pochettino has drawn himself to since he has come in. I know he got most of the starts at the Gold Cup last year. Gold Cup and World Cup, two very different things, and I know Matt Turner has experience at a World Cup, but it kind of just feels like this is Freeze's net right now. Your back three, I think, are going to be Tim Ream, Chris Richards, and Mark McKenzie. You look at your midfield four, Anthony Robinson, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, and Serginho Dest. Your top three are going to be Tim Weah, Florin Balogun, and Christian Pulisic. And this is kind of where the questions start coming in, because this is the most talented U.S. team, I would say, that they've kind of ever had. Most talent, I would agree with that. Is this the best team they have? Absolutely not. I look at, the 02 team, the team that beat Mexico in round 16, almost beat Germany in the quarterfinals. I look at the 2010 team. I know people don't love the 2010 team, but I would take the 2010 team over this team. 2014, I would take the 2014 team over the 2010 team, which means I'd take them over this team. I think this team is better than 22. I will give them that. Again, my biggest worry is goalkeeping. That is going to be the end-all, be-all for the United States. If they get good goalkeeping in this tournament from whether it be Matt Freese or Matt Turner, because Chris Brady sees the net, I think the U.S. is in major trouble. One of the Matts has to step up here. If the U.S. is going to advance at all in this tournament, one of the Matts has to step up. That is a crucial thing for the United States in this tournament. Of course, it's home field advantage. How much of an advantage are they going to have? We're going to have to wait and see. Let's move on, though. Paraguay, back in the World Cup. A team that didn't look great. I'll give them that. They did not look great at the beginning of qualifiers for Common Bowl. They figured it out later on, though. They really did figure it out. And they went on a run. They beat Brazil. They beat Argentina. I believe they beat Uruguay, too. I almost want to say they beat Ecuador. So they went on an absolute run here to get to this point. This is a good team. Again, not great. They're good. Start off against the United States, obviously. They will then play June 19th against Türkiye. Close out against Australia on June 25th. Let's take a look at the squad they are bringing here to the United States. And it's an interesting mix of a squad. Agatio Fernandez, Orlando Gil, and Gaston Oliveira are your goalkeepers. Your defenders are Gustavo Vasquez, Omar Adrante, Juan Jose Caceres, Fabian Balbuena, Junior Alonso, Jose Cantale, Gustavo Gomez, Alexandro Medina. Your midfielders are going to be Ramon Sosa, Diego Gomez, Miguel Almiron, Mauricio Andres Cubas, Damian Bobdilla, Brian Ojea, Matias Gallarda, and Gustavo Caballero. Your forwards are going to be Antonio Sanabria, Kaku, Alex Arc, Julio Ensco, Gabriel Alvalos, and Izio Pita close out your 26-man squad for Paraguay here at the World Cup. 4-2-3-1. This is how I have them lining up. I have Orlando Gil getting the start. I know he only has 5 caps, but it was between him and Gatillo Fernandez, who has 30 caps, but he's 38 years old. I feel like Gustavo Alfaro, the manager, is going to want... I think Orlando Gil is your number one. He's younger. I think he's the better goalkeeper, too. I tend to trust him more. I know he only has 5 caps, but I trust him more. You look at your defensive 4 here. You have Junior Alonso there on the left. Then in your defensive center backs are Omar Adarte and your captain Gustavo Gomez. Closing out on that right side for Paraguay is Jose Canales. Very interesting team that they have here. You look at your midfielders here in this 4-2-3-1. Bobadilla, Andres Kubash, and then in your attacking roles here are going to be Miguel Almiron, Julian Esco, and Diego Gomez. And then Antonio Sambrida is going to be your main attacker here for Paraguay. So with this squad, I would say my biggest worry for them, because as I mentioned, I think each team has major flaws, even though they're very good. The back line worries me a bit here for Paraguay. I can't say I've watched a ton of Paraguayan football. I've seen their qualifying games. Obviously, they were quite a different team from where they were at the beginning of qualifying, end of qualifying, all that stuff. I get it. But their back line doesn't instill true confidence in me. Not really sure how to feel about this team. This group is a mess. I'll just say it like that. We move on to Australia. 7th World Cup appearance being led by Tomi Pukovic. This is a interesting era, I will say, for Australian football. The Socceroos, I think they have one of the better teams they've had at a World Cup. Just because they have a good team on paper doesn't mean they'll actually be good in real life. That does worry me a bit. I'm excited to see how they play, though, because this group almost plays out perfectly for them in the way they play. They kind of like to take a stranglehold on a game. I think they can potentially do that in all 3 games. There is a major question, though, that I will get to here in a minute. You take a look at their schedule. Open up June 13th against Türkiye in Vancouver. They then have the game against the United States on June 19th. June 25th, they will close out the group stage against Paraguay. Let's take a look at that squad that Tony Popovic is bringing to the United States and Canada. Matthew Ryan, your captain, your goalkeeper. Paul Izzo and Patrick Beach are your goalkeepers. Milos Dendik, Alessandro Curati, Jacob Italiano, Jordan Bose, Jason Guerra, Kai Twen, Aziz Beach, Harry Suter, Cameron Burgess, and Lucas Harrington are your defenders. Your midfielders are Connor McAuliffe, Aidan O'Neill, Cammy Delvin, Jackson Irvine, and Paul Okan-Enskler. Forwards are Matthew Leckie, Mohamed Toure, Asian Harisic, Ewer Mabi, Nelstroy, Arankunda, Christian Volapdo, which there's an interesting story we'll get into here in a minute, Nilsen Veluplai, and Tete Yangi. Let's go back to Christian Volapdo here for a second here, because this is a player that only became a Australian player about a week ago. The news came out, I want to say it was late last week. So when we're recording right now, it was less than a week ago. It was reported that he was traveling to the Australian camp because he was officially declaring for the Australian national team. This is a player that was born in Australia, grew up in the youth academies in Australia, then I believe at 15 or 16, moved to Italy. He was a dual national, was in the Roma Academy, started working his way up through the Italian ranks. He plays still in Italy for Sassuolo, played for the, I want to say, U18 and U21 Italian teams. Hadn't got a call up to the Italian teams. Obviously, Italy isn't here. He officially makes his one-time switch. He is now Australian, and he will be representing Australia here at the World Cup with a grand total of 0 caps up to this point. That's going to be interesting because he could be a major key in what Australia does at this tournament. But let's get into the lineup here. There's a lot at play in this 3-4-2-1. The only thing I think solidified here is that Matthew Ryan is going to be your goalkeeper. He's the captain. He's going to be the one that is going to be figuring everything out. Your 3 in front of him, though, this is where it kind of gets messy because I feel like Australia can go a lot of places here. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers. Let's get into it, though. I have Burgess on the left here, left center back, Cameron Burgess. Your middle center back is going to be Alessandro Carratti, which it's another player that is, I mean, he was born in Italy and came through I believe it was the U20 team he went through. So he didn't have the 2 levels in Italy like we just talked about with Volapado. And then Jacob Italiano, I think he could potentially be here because he is a right back. I don't think they're going to play him there, though. I think it is going to be Sutar. That's why I have him technically in the midfield. Again, it's just kind of a mess. I'm not sure what Tony Popovich is going to do here. We keep going, though. Jordan Bose, I have on that left side of the midfield. Aidan O'Neill, and Jackson Irvine, I have in there. And then to close out, you have Leckie, Arundura, and Torre as your 3 kind of attackers here. This team is truly a mess because I don't know where goals are coming from. That is my biggest question here, and that's why Volapado could be a major role in what Australia does at this World Cup. My biggest worry is, how is Australia going to score? I get they like to choke games out, but how are they going to score here? I don't really have a lot of confidence in any of their attack. I like their defensive back line. I like what they can potentially do in the defensive midfield. Everything past that worries me. This is a team that I could see potentially topping the group. This is a team I can see crashing and burning and finishing in 4th in the group. Australia is always an interesting case. They've made it out of the group stage twice. 2006, 2022. It's a team that's always on the stage. It's just, can they finally get to that next level, potentially move on to a quarterfinal? And that's going to be the big question that Australia has to answer at this World Cup. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So one final team to get to here on this preview tonight, and that is Türkiye. Third World Cup appearance, first one since 2002. A team that really has come alive these past 10 years, obviously. They haven't qualified for the World Cup in those times, but I know they qualified for Euro 2016, I believe. Euro 2020 and 24. I believe they made it to the quarters in 24, I believe. So this is a team that truly might actually be figuring things out finally. Last time they were here was their best result. They finished in third place, where they beat South Korea in that third place game. This team starts off against Australia on June 13th. June 19th, they will face off against Paraguay in San Francisco. And they close off June 25th against the United States in a game that could matter to a lot of people here. Let's take a look at who has been called up to this squad by Vincenzo Montella, the Italian manager for this Türkiye team. And as a reminder, a sincere apology to anybody I offend here with pronunciations, because this is going to be an abject disaster. Mert Gündoğan, Elate Bandari, and Ukan Kadir are goalkeepers. Zeki Selik, Marie Demirel, Kelgar Sonuncu, Emran Emaldi, Abdurrahim Bararki, Ozan Kabak, Mert Mulder, Freddie Koglu, Samuel Adelin are going to be your defenders, your midfielders. Salih Okan, Orkan Koluku, Hakan Kalonju, Ismail Yukik, and Khan Ayan. Your forwards are Karim Ataruku, Arda Güler, Deniz Gül, Kenyan Yildiz, Irfan Konkavelch, Yusen Agun, Barzel Peryezmin, Olgar Adin, and Khan Uzan close out your group of 26 players for this World Cup. Let's take a look at how I think they'll line up here. 4-2-3-1. I have Qatar starting in net. Kalgu, Demirel, Bardakari, and Selik are going to be your four defensive players here. Kalungu picks up the captain's armband. Yusik, Yildiz, Konchu, Güler, and Yilmaz are going to close out that team there in that starting 11. I'm not really sure what to think about Türkiye here at this tournament. I know they are going to be the dark horse. I've already heard it 10 different places. Is this the year that Türkiye is finally truly the dark horse? I don't think so. Every time a dark horse is hyped up by so many people, it never happens. And that's why it always scares me when they say Türkiye, because truly the first time I really bought into it was Euro 2020, and it was a disaster. It was an abject disaster. I cannot say it any better, that it was just an abject disaster. So part of me just doesn't trust this team. And the other part of me is just, I don't really know how to feel about them. This is a group where it's just, everything is questionable here just because I'm not fully entwined in Türkiye football. It's as simple as that. This is a team that has the potential to be good. I can give them that. They have some really good talent on this team. Arda Güler, of course. Yildiz, Yilmaz. I like all these players. The biggest question is, can they actually produce at an international level at a tournament like the World Cup? So there we have it. Group D. This group is the most up in the air. This is the one I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I think each team has their both gripes and hopes here. I really don't know what I'm going to pick here. And that's why I'm going to leave this one. I don't have any picks until actual prediction day, which is coming next week, because I truly don't know how this is going to play out. This is a very interesting group, a lot of interesting teams. It does worry me a bit that any of these teams can finish first and any of these teams can finish fourth, because they all have major issues, but they're all good. So I will leave it at that. So that is going to wrap it up for this episode. Group C and D preview are over. We will be back tomorrow. Of course, that means groups E and F. So make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe. Tell anybody you know about it. We're putting in a lot of work here at the Nick Bird Sports Network to make sure you, the viewer, are informed going into this World Cup, so you're not just, we're just going to watch this casually. I need you to know everything you need to know. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow for another episode here of World Cup Preview here on the Nick Burt Sports Network.